Imagine the whole church discovering their passion to care, one small group at a time. You're listening to this special podcast series, Care Journey, from the Journey with Care podcast. We are in our Care Journey series. If you haven't listened to our previous episode, we went through the topics that we're going to be going through for the series. We talked about the purpose of this Care Journey course, which we talked about is a small group course leading up to why we decided to develop this course. And we're actually doing this podcast not as part of that course, but the topics are dear to CareImpact's heart. So we figured this is a good way to complement the course that we developed and just share some of the things that the Lord has been stirring at CareImpact. So today we have a real treat. As you might have remembered, last week Wendy said she's going to tell a bit about our story today with her husband, Harold. So my co-host Wendy is stepping out from behind the mic and going through a guest mic instead. It's the same mic, but so Wendy and Harold founded CareImpact, and as we're about to celebrate our 10th anniversary, it's the perfect time to dive into their Kairos moments that sparked this incredible journey. So last week we said this week we're going to be doing Kairos moments. If you don't remember, those Kairos moments aren't those ordinary everyday things. They're those unexpected, divinely timed moments that can change everything. It's like that little hidden gem you found in a small town. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that we have Journey with Prayer, 5-minute devotional series to start off your week. That's on a separate feed. You can find that in the show notes, or just go to our website at journeywithcare.ca. And we can only continue to produce this great content, these interviews, by the help of our listeners and the generosity of our listeners and donors and sponsors. If you want to get involved in that, if you want to sponsor the podcast as a business, or if you just want to send some donations our way to support what we're doing at CareImpact in the community, head over to journeywithcare.ca or careimpact.ca, and you can find ways of doing that, and we would love to have you as part of our team. All right, enough of that. We want to get into our conversation with Wendy and Harold. Wendy, how was my intro there for Kairos Moments? What did I miss?
No, I think you summed it up. And I think if we could preface what a Kairos moment is, it isn't necessarily angels coming through the sky and saying, hear ye, or these magnificent moments. And in fact, sometimes in retrospect, we see the fingerprints of God and how he broke in the ordinary things. It's those tiny micro things that happen where we pay attention to it. And Harold and I, we're excited to tell our story. There's a lot of Kairos moments in our lives that brought us to where we are right now, and we're still anticipating more to come. But everybody can encounter God in the daily life, as they're washing dishes, going down the street, shopping groceries. There are Kairos moments waited. And may I just add, there's probably so many times where I miss out on those God moments in my life. But we're going to talk today about where God did get our attention, where we did give our yes. And ultimately, we want to give glory to God for the way that he was persistent in pursuing us and writing our story.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those key experiences that led up to you guys starting CareImpact. You can go as far back as you need. It's your guys' story, your Kairos moment. So however far back you need to go to that first Kairos moment.
Yeah, life was busy, but it was going well. We had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and we wanted to celebrate our 1-year-old's birthday with relatives. And so life was just going pretty smoothly at that point.
Yeah, you were in full-time ministry. You were in the prisons as a chaplain and in pastoring and using your counseling skills. I was running a center, a community center with the Salvation Army, overseeing a huge project and really, really loving it. We were in our prime. We were like, yes, we're finished our family. We had 1 boy, 1 girl. Now let's go visit Harold's family in Korea and celebrate together as a family. We felt we were pretty set, didn't we? We kind of were serving the Lord, and we were set to go. So take us on that journey to Korea. What happened there?
Well, it was a particular Sunday that we were planning to go to a church that was recommended by a friend. And so took us probably an hour to get there. And when we got there, we were a bit disappointed because there wasn't the regular pastor who was going to preach, but there was some guest speaker.
From Texas, no, nonetheless.
Yes, from Texas, yeah. And so we're kind of disappointed, but we were listening in, and as we started to hear more about his story, we learned more about his adoption journey, how he had adopted children from Korea. And in fact, the children were there, and we were able to meet with the children and really hear more about God's heart for adoption.
Yeah, and that was the first time I'd grown up in the church. But that was the first time I heard the gospel shared to me as God pursuing us in that spirit of adoption and that permanency with Christ in the gospel sense, and how God puts the lonely in families. And it just struck a chord there. But then we went on, right? We ate kimchi, we had lunch, and nothing happened, right? We had a regular church service as we do. But tell me what else went on later on.
Well, that night, both of us, we had dreams, and in the morning we talked about the fact that we each had a dream, and it has never happened like this before or since, but we both dreamt about adopting. And so it was a bit of a shock for us to be able to have this type of discussion, and it really was the starting point for us to be able to go on this journey that eventually led to CareImpact.
Yeah, I remember waking up from that dream. It wasn't just indigestion from kimchi. It was one of those like, oh my goodness, God's arresting me with a thought that wasn't mine. And I thought, what is Harold going to think when I tell him in the morning I had this dream? They were to adopt, and I had pictures of older children that were to join our family. And here right beside me, I had these little toddlers, right? And I'm like, this is freaky. I don't know about this. But to wake up and see that you had that dream too was it stopped us in our track, and we had to pray about it. We didn't just jump on board and come back to Canada and say, okay, let's sign up for the class. We're so excited. We've always dreamt of having a huge family, because we didn't have a dream to add to our family. This was breaking into our dream. It was interrupting what the plans that we had. Like, God, didn't you know we are busy in ministry? How are we going to add people to our family? And adding older children, we took about a year, didn't we, Harold?
Yeah, it was about a year doing some research, praying through all of this. And so, yeah, like I just felt like that moment in Korea, it was a God moment looking back.
And we could have missed it. That's what I think. I'm like, oh my goodness. And I look at our family now and how fast forward, and God has added 4 older children into our lives in different ways, and 2 grandkids into our lives. So we do have a larger family, and it's not what we had planned. But God has been writing that piece. But as we were researching that year, Harold, you were already working on a doctorate. See, we didn't have time for adoption either because you were doing your doctorate. We're professional Christians here, guys. I'm saying that sarcastically. But we were pursuing the doctorate. Anybody that has gone with a spouse doing a doctorate knows what that means. And we were doing some research. You were going on a different track. But as we were researching adoption and the need and the theology and all of that, what happened to that project that you were working on?
Yeah. So basically, as I was doing my research, and as we had this experience in Korea, it actually made me want to change my research, my thesis. And so as I looked more into adoption, attachment, these kind of areas, then I was able to find out about this conference in the States, which eventually led us to going to Nashville to really be exposed to what this looks like, this world of adoption and foster care.
Yeah, so we were planning to go, and So we were planning to go, and I registered us because the two of us were going to go down there. I was going to be your research assistant, and we were going to meet different authors and different people we were going to interview for this project. And I got an email. We got an email from somebody organizing this. And we have to remember, CAFO is a huge organization, a huge network, that there's about 3,000 people there, and we're only two. But I got one of the organizers from there contacted us personally and said an email, "You're from Canada. We've been praying for Canada, and we're hosting this global leadership network for the first time. And we would love some national leaders from Canada to participate in this global forum." And I laughed, and I quickly easily responded. And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We're just researchers. We're nobody in Canada. We're not leaders of anything in Canada. We're just coming for this research project." And to his response, and a shout out to David Hennessy, who continues to be a good friend and mentor and champion of what we're doing in Canada. He said, "No, I feel like God has called you to come here. I want you to participate. We will sponsor you. We are going to give you accommodations. We will feed you. We need you here. Would you please come?" Now, we looked after and said there was more Canadians there, but why was he picking on us? But we actually stayed at a lovely couple's house who were part of our God story, and the Bill and Maria Lee, who are now the governors of Tennessee. They sat with us and prayed us through this God encounter that we were having in Tennessee as we came simply for research, but God had more.
Yeah, I remember as we were leaving the residence at the end of the conference, and they handed us some gifts. And one of the gifts was an envelope which contained a significant amount of money. They realized that we had something on our hearts to start in Canada, and they wanted to encourage us in that journey through that financial gift. And so that was very moving. That was a sign that I felt like God was guiding us into this area of starting something. We didn't know exactly what we were going to start, but we just felt like God was moving in our hearts towards that direction.
That's right. And one of the things that I found significant at that time in the conference, now it's not just about sign up for a conference and God's going to speak to you. It's always in these unexpected ways. And during that year previous where we were praying about adoption, we were seeking the Lord and doing the right steps to move forward in obedience. All the things that God had been depositing in my heart were being spoken to on stage or in encounters over lunches and stuff. And they were reading my mail. And it just arrested me in such a way. I'm like, God is in the details. And we could have missed this. And yet, so after we left that driveway, we weren't sure what it would mean. But interestingly enough, God had already invited me to quit my job. And I didn't know why. But I felt I was disobedient if I had continued on in a job that I loved. I had to lay that down. It meant financial security that I had to wrestle with God, but he's like, "No, I want you to pursue me. I have something else in store." And so I did. And this was at a pinnacle time where I had just received an award from what was it, the Diamond Jubilee or something like that for excellence in changing the community. We had just opened a $6.6 million project of a new building and a facility and a green space that I had just restructured the staff, and we were just in a really good place. And when I was in that space, I was just like, now I can sail. Now God can work through me. And yet he said, now you're done. And so I quit that. And when we got off that driveway going back to Winnipeg, you said the same thing. You're like, I think I need to quit my job. Can you tell me what went through your mind?
Yeah, I think that conference, it helped me to realize that there's another world out there that God had given me an opportunity to experience, to learn about children that are in difficult situations, families where there is a lot of love and a lot of acceptance, that they're able to take in children that are needing homes. And so that really opened up my eyes to a different world. And so I really felt strongly that, there was a shift happening here, and that even though I had been in the prisons for 7 years as a chaplain, I felt like God was calling me out of that environment, even though I really felt that was a huge calling on my life for those years. But I sensed that the tide was shifting.
So, to my surprise, because keep in mind, those of you that know us know we're not necessarily irrational people. We think through things, we research things. For us to both quit our jobs and have zero income was something that was uncharacteristic of us, but we felt so strongly that the Lord had called us. So we came back, and a week later, much to my surprise, Harold said, "Okay." I told him, I gave him my notice. I'm like, "Say what?" He's like, "We were going to do this, right?" And I'm like, "I know, but I'm feeling a little insecure here." But I knew it was the right thing to do. And when we talked to some dear friends of ours and sponsors of that ministry position, and we told them our story and what God was doing, they basically told us, like, "You can't quit." And we're like, do you remember that, Harold?
Yeah. Like, I think they were surprised, but I really felt like it was, I guess God brings people into one's life for a reason. And I really felt like they were key supporters of what we were doing. And so they felt that as well. They sensed that in our hearts. And so I think that they really had a level of acceptance there.
They did, but they said, "You can't quit," which kind of got our, like, "What do you mean?" And they said, "You can quit your positions there, but we really see God's hand in your story, and we want to continue to sponsor the new venture that God has you on." And so with that, we had their blessing. We had other people. We had consulted as we were quitting our jobs, a financial advisor. We thought, surely he's going to talk us off the cliff. But he was a man of God, and he prayed over us. And he says, "No, I think God is calling you. This sounds crazy, but actually, you are in a good place. You don't have deficit. You can move forward in this, and we want to support you." And so everybody that we were consulting, not everybody, I should say, there were key people that God had led us to consult, and they had given us wisdom and blessing and prayed over us and sent us on our way. And yet there was many people who thought, "You know what, this is crazy. How dare you give up good ministry? How dare you do this to your children?" And they really weren't necessarily supportive around us. Many people were, but some people thought we were just a little loopy to do what we were doing. But 2 weeks later, or a few weeks later, we packed up our kids. And at that point, we had already added one older child to our family, and we packed her up as well. And we all went on this, what we called a God-chasing trip across Canada. Because keep in mind, we didn't know what God was calling us to. We just knew it was something that he would reveal to us. And so we were becoming detectives. We were just becoming curious. "God, what is it that you need us to hear?" And so that's exactly what we did. We packed up the van. We drove across. We made as many contacts as we could. A lot of cold call coffee dates, and one person leading us to another, networking as we were going. Just asking and listening, Christian adoptive families, Christian leaders, secular government officials, organizations that didn't work well with the church, but they were in the area of child welfare. We came there to listen, and what a trip that was. Harold, what was it like for you driving that trip?
Well, it was a very interesting time because we were just open to what was out there. We were trying to learn. We were trying to understand the landscape. And so it was one of those times, it's almost like walking or journeying through the wilderness, not knowing exactly where you're going. But hopefully we were able to gain a bit more clarity with each conversation. So it was a bit challenging at times, but I still felt at that time that God was guiding us into those type of relationships.
And I know one thing that I was hoping for. See, sometimes I like to tell God I want to curate how God wants to write these stories. And then he reminds me he's got the pen, not me. I was having this conversation with God saying, God, I do not want to start another organization. God forbid, there's enough charities out there. Let's not start one more. Come on. It surely couldn't be. God couldn't lead us to start another organization. It was one of my pet peeves. Why don't organizations work together? Maybe we can find a like-minded organization. Surely what God has put on our heart and we were passionate about is on the hearts of other organizations that we would be aligned with and we could work for and with, and in that way. And one of the things that we realized as we pulled back on our driveway, and we were even saying, God, do you want us to move? We could go anywhere now. Why Winnipeg? But God brought us back to Winnipeg. And he wanted us to start an organization. And we talked with some mentors and dear friends of ours that would pray with us and we could be accountable to. And they're like, Wendy, that you need to do this. And I'm like, I know, but I'm scared. I don't want to start another organization. I know enough because I've been in ED. I know how much work that is and the responsibility it is to carry that. And I don't know if I'm up for the challenge. And God worked in the details. He provided us a legal team financially and wisdom-wise to set this up with us. He provided us with a board. He provided us with people cheering us on and supporting our family as we were just navigating what it meant to be CareImpact. At that time, we'd started with Forever Families of Canada, fun side fact. It was really just a research project. I'd created this Facebook site and I was actually tracking the analytics of how people responded to different things I put out. And I just created a no-name brand called Forever Families of Canada. That's how it actually started. It wasn't not a very spiritual starting, but I was just observing people and interacting with people to see how they reacted to different content. And that became our brand, which now we are CareImpact. But it wasn't in the sense that, God, I've always wanted to be a co-founder of this organization, but God had put it on our hearts and he led us forward in that.
So when you were contemplating this, you talked about what organizations could we join up with that would share this vision. So why didn't that happen, and why did you have to start your own organization?
Well, one of the things that we found out is that people did have this vision, but it wasn't part of their mandates. They were like, that sounds wonderful. We want to be part of that. But it wasn't their mandates, and for good reasons too. They're doing wonderful things. But we realized this was a gap that was not being filled. As we were even doing our research, we were networking people. We were saying, oh, you are passionate about this. Did you know just half an hour away, we talked to so-and-so and they have that passion and you guys could work together. And we were doing this across the country. We were doing it across cities. We were actually filling in some needs while we were just simply doing our research. I love networking. And so naturally, I want people to work together. And we were realizing this was a gap. CareImpact is a gap that needed to happen. It's something actually, I think that was birthed within Harold and myself in our stories when we were, if you take us back into his chaplaincy and the church ministry work and my role as ED of a community center, we asked ourselves in those moments when we were in the prisons and in the communities, the big question is, where's the church? We can't have enough resources, enough services, enough projects and funds to meet the needs of the whole community. Those were important. Okay? Those were important. However, we wanted to see how the church could integrate in a relational way. And that wasn't being done across Canada to all our research and knowledge, maybe on micro levels. And those things, those are areas that we were deeply researching. But on a national level, there wasn't a gap filler between what was happening in social services, what was happening on some of the poverty and the child welfare crises and the trauma that was happening in our country. There was a disconnect with the local church. And we felt that when we bring people that came to our doorstep into the church, it was awkward. We had to do a lot of gap filling It wasn't natural for the church to be in these places when prisoners got out of their sentence. It wasn't easy for people that were trafficked to integrate into the church. And we're like, are there resources? Can we equip the church to be the church in these spaces?
So after we came back from Korea, with this calling that we felt in the area of child welfare, it was interesting how there were people that knocked on our doors and were looking for, essentially, they're looking for family, they're looking for support. And so one by one, we had people with mental health issues, homelessness related issues. There were so many different challenges that people were facing that were just looking for a place to rest, a place for support and connection. And so as we were able to take them in, we were able to recognize some of the real struggles that they were facing. And it helped us to learn more about how we could be of service in our future ministry. And so they were really the educators for us. They helped us to learn about the needs out there.
I think that was a significant part of our story, actually. The many people that came through our doors, those were our Kairos moments. You're right. As soon as we landed from Korea, and keep in mind, we were living in the community that I was in, community development. We believed to move right in, and we had a lot of people. We had a lot of connections, but we didn't have our house full. When we came back, we had, I think it was 11 beds donated to us from different people. We had bunk beds and queen beds and this and that. And we're like, Lord, what are you doing here? And we filled our house with beds. And sure enough, as soon as we landed from Korea, we had somebody that was being released from a psychiatric hospital that needed home. And he was part of our lives already, but he needed more. He needed family. And so he came into it. And we're not the type of people that just collects people and have no discrimination or like just where we have no discernment and we just do everything. No, these were God appointed moments meant for us, and we welcomed them in. And I remember one Easter Sunday, and this was just like nonstop. One Easter Sunday, we had a couple at our door in the evening. It was like 8:00 at night. We were putting the kids to bed, and we had this couple come into our home, and we had already known them, but they were obviously distraught. They had just lost their home. Their kids were just removed from their family into social services, and they were visibly distraught, as one would if you had that Job moment. And they came in and we fed them and we talked, and we weren't sure exactly the way forward or if they were staying, but obviously they needed to stay somewhere. And I remember I was in a time where we were like busy in research, and we were starting this organization, and like, Lord, don't you know we don't have time for this? We're researching. We're building your ministry. And God arrested me and said, you know what? They are your professors. They are the interruption that you need to learn. You can't just depend on head knowledge. You can't just depend on building this structure up if you're not going to allow me to interrupt you with the people that you really need to sit with. And we did. She had gone through 60 some foster homes herself. And she says, and now they're taking my children too. And her parents and grandparents had gone through residential school and trying to find her God-given Indigenous identity and sitting with her through lawyer appointments and court appointments and the distraught and the discrimination that she felt. I needed to be there with her more than she needed me there with her. But we journeyed that together for some time. And he was also had some immigration issues and things like that. And we sat there and he also experienced a lot of racism as well, being Black. And we needed to sit there with them, and we had laughter and tears and so many things that and there was time and time again. We had an international student, 8.5 months pregnant, come sit with us or come be with us. And we got to see that that life come to be, from an abortion story to a failed abortion to the glory of God coming through life in that child. We've had so many. In fact, our kids, when they were like, they didn't know any better because they were 1 and 3 when we started on this journey, our biological kids. There was a time where there was like a week or two where we didn't have people coming, staying with us. And I remember one of them saying, "What's going on? Why isn't God sending us anybody else?" Because they were just anticipating who's going to show up at our door next. But we learned so much. We needed that. We still need that. We're still getting interrupted. This story doesn't end there. We continuously are living this out, and God is bringing people into our lives for seasons and sometimes forever.
And one of the things I find is a real blessing from this is our two biological children. They've grown up in this kind of environment where our home is an open door to those in need, and they've never once questioned anything about the people that have come into our home. They've never asked questions that are to the effect of why are they here. They really have just accepted each and every person, and I know that for them this is normal, and I feel blessed that they're able to have that sense of openness towards others from all sorts of backgrounds, with various challenges that people bring in. They're able to be with them and not have any complaints. And I really, I look forward to seeing what their futures are like as God works in their hearts through that.
Yeah, because some people would be concerned, oh, you're ruining your life in a sense. You're ruining your life, essentially. What's that going to do to your biological kids? You got to be protective. We often cloak wisdom as like just being cautious and paranoid. And that's not wisdom. Sometimes you got to put yourself out there. And I think it's been a real blessing. And out of these Kairos moments, I just got to say, yes, there's sacrifice involved financially. You got to get over yourself. Your security, you got to get over yourself. And yes, there's a lot of like, God, if you don't show up, I'm hooped. My family is hooped. So there's a lot of trust that needs to be developed. That's a muscle that needs to be developed. But God can be trusted in the details. When he calls, when he breaks in, when he gives you that aha moment, you will want to pursue that with all your heart when you experience the presence of God. And I'm reminded of like Matthew 13:44, the parable of the hidden treasure and the pearl. When you know that there's a treasure there, when God is breaking in and saying, there's a treasure here and I want you to pursue it, you sell all you have. You get sold out for this, for the glory of God, because in there, God can be found. And sometimes we're looking for the presence of God in the wrong places. We just want a hallelujah moment on a Sunday morning. When God is found in the details, God is found in the homelessness, the person going through homelessness, God is found in the places of mental health God is found in the place of mental illness. God is found in these places where you have these dreams of quitting your job and these unthinkable things. But if there's anything that I can encourage our listeners today is if God is breaking in, pray about it. Surround yourself with people who can walk with you in that. But God can be trusted in those details. Sell all you have for what it is that God has put on your heart. And I would do it all over again, and I would probably do it more bravely. If I could tell myself 10 years ago what we've come through, what we've learned, and it's been hard. It's not been easy. We're not going to romanticize it, but I wouldn't want it any different. I would do it all over again, probably just a little more brave and probably paying attention to more and more of those Kairos moments that I've probably missed. But God can be trusted.
And it takes that initial Kairos moment to get your attention, and then many other smaller ones along the way. One of my favorite verses is Proverbs 69, where it says, "We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps." So I love that. It's like you guys probably had a little bit of a vision when you got that Kairos moment, but you didn't know the steps to get there. But he put people in your path. He gave you those small Kairos moments along the way to help determine those steps. And he's still leading. And how much different has your vision changed since you started the organization? How much has it grown? I'm sure there's a lot more stories we can tell. So,
Well, and we're still on that treasure hunt. Now we have a team, a wonderful team who are also sold out for the calling that God has for the church, to help the church rise up and be effective in these spaces, and to be with the most marginalized in an effective way. And we are now a team, a growing team, and we're partnering with more and more people who are on team, who want to pursue the glory of God, who want to see the church in these spaces. And we're on this treasure hunt together, and God continuously breaks in. We think we have a path and we are moving forward, and God continues to instruct us along the way. He is leading us like the Good Shepherd always does.
and I just want to end by encouraging our listeners, if you're hearing this story and you are getting stirred, like, what's the invitation for the Lord for you to become part of this story, this Kairos moment that Wendi and Harold had so many years back? The Lord brings people into these storylines and he does great things. So what is your part in this story? Thank you for joining another conversation on Journey with Care, where we inspire curious Canadians on their path of faith and living life with purpose in community. Journey with Care is an initiative of CareImpact, a Canadian charity dedicated to connecting and equipping the whole church to journey well in community. You can visit their website at careimpact.ca or visit journeywithcare.ca to get more information on weekly episodes, Journey with Prayer, and details about our upcoming events and meetups. You can also leave us a message, share your thoughts, and connect with like-minded individuals who are on their own journeys of faith and purpose. Thank you for sharing this podcast and helping these stories reach the community. Together we can explore ways to journey in a good way. And always remember to stay curious.